From February 4th to 20th, 2022, Beijing will host the 24th Winter Olympic Games. It will be the first city to have held both the Summer and Winter Olympics. On October 20th, the Olympic torch arrived in Beijing, starting the countdown to the Winter Games. These games are being held in the shadow of a global pandemic and in the face of calls for a boycott. China has announced more strict hygiene standards than those of the 2021 Summer Games in Tokyo. Why? We will explain later in the episode. How the Olympic torch is carried in 2021 is in stark contrast to 2008, when China hosted the Olympics for the first time. The ceremony was held in Tiananmen Square and was watched by thousands of spectators. China's month-long international torch relay was the highlight of 2008. However, in 2021, the arrival of the Olympic torch was received by China in a very low-key fashion. Only a small delegation greeted the flight carrying the flame at the airport in Beijing. The lighting ceremony was held indoors in Beijing's Olympic Park without an audience. International journalists were notified in less than 12 hours. This time, organizers had planned a short torch relay in China on the eve of the opening ceremony of the Beijing Winter Olympics on February 4th, 2022.
2022年2月2日至4日开展传统火炬传递活动，在北京、延庆、张家口3个赛区进行接力，共有火炬手约1200名。
The official lighting of the Olympic flame in Athens on October 18th was equally low-key. Human rights activists managed to avoid security during the lighting of the torch by displaying a Tibetan flag and a banner.
President Xi Jinping was and is committed to the success of these Olympic Winter Games from the very beginning. And he has made this clear in all the conversations we had there over the years.
For Beijing to host both Summer and Winter Olympic Games is an Olympic record because no city up to now has organized both events. And as you did for the Summer Games in 2008, I'm convinced that the preparations for the Beijing 2022 Winter Games are going very well and that we'll experience fantastic Winter Games.
But the IOC is not the IOC's remit is to ensure that there is no human rights abuses in respect of the conduct of the Games within the National Olympic Committees or within the Olympic movement. We have no ability to go into a country and tell them what to do. All we can do is to award the Olympic Games to a country under conditions set out in a host contract, and Brisbane's got it, and then ensure that they are followed.
In a media interview, David Kilgore, former director of Canada's Asia-Pacific Division, said Coates ignored the long history of the Olympics, which included high regard for humanity.
The Olympic torch is supposed to represent peace and hope, but for our people who are living under the brutal Chinese Communist Party, this represents global complicity in China's extreme repression. Really come unified and under one message. And I think no one can stop us, not the IOC, not governments, not sponsors, not athletes. We are unified on this issue and we will not stop.
U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi also criticized the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, for human rights violations during a congressional hearing on May 18th, calling for a diplomatic boycott and adding that global leaders participating in the Winter Olympics would lose their moral authority. Other members of the U.S. Congress held the same view, which means no federal funds will be used to support federal employees participating in the Olympics. On July 8, 2021, the European Parliament passed a non-binding resolution with 578 votes in favor, 29 against, and 73 abandoned, urging officials from the European Union and member states not to attend the Beijing Winter Olympics. According to the French news agency AFP, this vote in the European Parliament is one of the signs of the deterioration of relations between the EU and China. On September 7, 2021, more than 200 human rights organizations sent a joint open letter to NBC and other major broadcasters calling on them to cancel their broadcast and coverage of the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics events. While the resolution and the legislature's calls aren't binding and some national parties don't agree, it should create pressure on officials in various countries. China plans to adopt more strict COVID procedures than those in the 2021 Summer Games may well provide the best excuse for officials who don't want to offend Beijing or upset public opinion in their own countries. They can politely refuse to travel to Beijing. Beijing informed the Olympic and Paralympic Executive Committee on September 29th of its key policies for the prevention and control of outbreaks at the Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games. Immediately afterward, a public announcement was made by the International Olympic Committee and the Beijing Organizing Committee. Specifically, the main measures are as follows. First, tickets for the Winter Olympics will only be sold to spectators in mainland China. Second, all participating athletes, officials, journalists, and Olympic staff will be forced to eat, sleep, train, work, and compete in a closed environment from the day they arrive until they leave. Third, to enter this closed environment, one needs to meet the following requirements. Complete full vaccination 14 days before arrival in China or 21 days of individual isolation upon arrival in Beijing. Fourth, all vaccines currently officially approved by the World Health Organization or relevant countries and regions will be recognized. 5. A dedicated transportation system will also be used within the closed loop, and daily nucleic acid testing will be performed on all relevant personnel. China has carried out closed-loop management for personnel entering the country for the test events. Starting on October 5th, the test events will be held in 8 ice and snow competition venues in Beijing and a northern province in the next 3 months till December 31st. The occupancy rate of our vehicles is limited to less than 50%, with special cars and exclusive seats designated to specific personnel. Our drivers disinfect vehicles after the shuttle service every day. Let's compare Beijing's procedures to Tokyo's. First, athletes, officials, journalists, etc., who went to Japan weren't required to be vaccinated and needed only a 3-day quarantine upon arrival. They weren't strictly limited to staying in the venues but were allowed to contact the outside. Nevertheless, participants were also tested daily for nucleic acid. Secondly, local staff in Tokyo weren't required to remain under closed management, but were allowed to travel from their homes to the venues daily. In addition, Olympic athletes were free to move around the city after 14 days of entry. Beijing's measures, especially the 2 alternative requirements regarding vaccinations, are unprecedented in major sports federations' requirements for their participants. What will happen as a result? As a direct consequence, those athletes, officials, and others who refuse to be vaccinated will most likely choose to forego participation in the Winter Olympics in Beijing. Some of them are doing so for reasons of faith, but many have more faith in natural immunity. In addition, when international athletes, officials, and others are strictly restricted to live in a closed environment where they can't visit attractions and try various cuisines, the trip to Beijing is much less attractive. It's unknown if people will give up their trip due to this reason. As such, it's hard to tell how many national players, especially the best athletes in the world, will compete in the Beijing Winter Olympics. In 2018, a total of 2,952 athletes from 92 countries competed in the Winter Olympics in South Korea, the largest ever. The top 10 countries that won gold medals in the 2018 Winter Olympics were Norway, Germany, Canada, the US, the Netherlands, Sweden, South Korea, Switzerland, France, and Austria, all of which were European and American countries except South Korea, which had the advantage of being the host. In other words, whether the Winter Olympics are exciting or not is closely related to the participation of the best players from these countries. How many athletes from Europe and America participate in the Winter Olympics is thus the point of interest. If the number of participants is small, the Beijing Winter Olympics will be much less exciting to watch. Given the unpredictable coronavirus, the CCP may indeed want to create an impermeable quarantine zone for the Olympics, as maintaining stability has always been the #1 priority of the Beijing regime. Moreover, the most crucial meeting of the CCP regime, its 20th National Congress, will be held in the second half of 2022. The meeting will decide whether Xi will be re-elected as the CCP leader and how power will be redistributed among the CCP's most influential members. In March 2021, the Chinese government held 2 critical meetings known as the 2 sessions. The ongoing fighting among the CCP's top echelon has reached a deadly stage. The CCP obviously doesn't want another outbreak in Beijing that could spark a shakeup. On November 3, 2013, the Chinese Olympic Committee officially wrote to the International Olympic Committee to nominate Beijing as the host city for the 2022 Winter Olympics. In less than 10 years, from 2013 to 2022, the world's perception of Red China has changed dramatically. How to safely and decently host the Winter Olympics will become a difficult task, one that Beijing probably didn't anticipate when it applied for the Games.